I swear, the night everything flipped on its head started out like the most boring family dinner you can imagine. You know the type. Folks pretending to be polite, forks clinking, everyone acting like they're starring in some low-budget Hallmark reboot. I was standing at the table with a serving spoon in my hand, trying to keep the mashed potatoes warm because Lord knows this family loses track of time even when they're looking right at it. Then Thomas, my son-in-law with the personality of a cheap necktie, leans back in his chair, lifts his wine glass, and loudly says, "Man, Martha is getting kind of senile these days, huh?" Like he was commenting on the weather. And the room laughed. They actually laughed. One awkward little snort from the cousin who never pays attention to anything, a little smirk from someone who's been waiting years to laugh at me, and the rest trying to pretend they didn't hear it. But I heard it. Oh, trust me, I heard every syllable. That word senile didn't slice me like a knife. I'm too old to be cut by the cheap stuff, but it settled in my chest like a cold stone. I looked over at my daughter, Caroline. She should have said something, right? I mean, that's your kid. That's supposed to be your person. But nope, she just adjusted her bracelet like it suddenly had somewhere else to be. Wouldn't even look at me. And that, God help me, that hurt more than Thomas running his mouth. This was the same girl who used to march across playgrounds to defend me from rude parents. Now she stood by a man who thinks sensitivity is some kind of medical condition. I set the spoon down real carefully, like if I moved too fast, I might shatter. Not in front of them, of course. In front of them, I stood steady, a 74-year-old oak tree. My voice didn't crack, my hands didn't shake, but inside, it felt like someone plucked the last tight string holding me together and it snapped with a sound only I heard. Thomas kept talking because men like him don't know when to shut up. He said something like, "Older folks get confused, it's normal, no offense," as if adding "no offense" magically cleaned the dirt off the insult. I just started clearing plates, slow, steady movements, not because I was trying to be polite, but because the warm water in the sink helps me think. I'm old, sure, but my mind is sharp, sharper than Thomas would ever guess with that forehead he uses as a personality trait. And as I washed those plates, something became clear, clearer than anything had been in years. I had spent decades patching holes in my family's life, paying bills they couldn't manage, babysitting for free, helping with repairs, slipping them money when they pretended they forgot their wallets. All those years of handing out help like candy, and they had mistaken my silence for weakness, my patience for stupidity, my generosity for obligation. Not one person at that table had the courage to say, "Hey, that was disrespectful." So I dried my hands, walked back in, and said the calmest words that have ever walked out of my mouth. "I'm going home." You want to see a group of people panic? Tell them the person they take for granted is leaving. Caroline popped up like she sat on a tack. She said, "Mom, don't be dramatic." Thomas smirked, thinking I was just hurt, thinking I'd go home and cry a little, bake them something next week, pretend it didn't happen. Poor man. See, what they didn't know was that earlier that week, before any of this played out, I had already met with my lawyer. I had already started making decisions, real ones, quiet ones, grown woman decisions, the kind that changed the weather in a room. So when I picked up my coat and walked out of that house, I didn't look back. And for the first time in a long time, that walk to my car didn't feel heavy. It felt like the start of something, a shift, a turning point. My husband used to tell me, "Dignity isn't noise, Martha. It's knowing when to speak and when to stop letting people talk over you. So I drove home, the street lights glowing against my windshield, knowing one thing for certain. They thought they knew me. They thought they knew what I would accept. They thought I was too old, too fragile, too dependent to ever make a move without their approval. But they were wrong, and I had the paperwork to prove it. When I walked into my house, it felt cold, even if the thermostat said otherwise. Grief has a temperature. So does humiliation. But clarity? That one burns warm. I hung up my coat, put the kettle on, and stared at the framed photo of me and my husband on our 45th anniversary. He leaned toward me in that picture, listening like he always did. And I whispered, "You'd laugh at them, you really would." Because the truth was simple. I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. And the next time my family saw me, nothing, and I mean nothing, would look the same.
That night, when I finally settled into my quiet house, something felt different. Not in a dramatic movie scene way, but in the slow, settling way a truth finally sits down beside you and says, "Hey, I've been here all along. You just stopped looking." I made myself a cup of tea, even though I didn't really want tea. Sometimes you just need something warm in your hands to keep your thoughts from shaking loose. The kettle clicked, the steam purled up, and I sat down at the kitchen table like I'd done thousands of times before. Only this time, it felt like the air had shifted around me, like the house itself was waiting for me to say something out loud. I glanced toward the coat rack, the same wooden peg my husband used for 30 years. Sometimes I swear I can still smell his cologne. Cedar, warm like autumn. I rested my hand there for a moment, letting memories settle in. Richard never raised his voice, never made me feel small, never treated aging like a flaw. He used to say, "Martha, people forget the older you get, the more you actually know." And now here I was, being told I was senile by a man who can't even fix a leaky faucet without calling YouTube for help. I walked into the living room, letting the silence wrap around me. The soft tick of the old clock filled the room, a rhythm steady enough to keep a person grounded. That clock had seen everything. Arguments, birthdays, Christmas mornings, heartbreaks, reconciliations. And now it watched me stand there, feeling a mix of anger, disappointment, and the weirdest sense of relief I'd felt in years. Because the truth, the real truth, had finally come out. Not the made-up one I kept protecting with excuses. People don't change overnight. They change slowly, like fabric fading in the sun. And Caroline, my sweet, stubborn, sensitive daughter, had been drifting from me for years. Looking back, I can't pinpoint the exact moment she stopped being my little girl and became someone I had to measure my words around. Maybe it was college, maybe it was marriage, or maybe it was the slow influence of a man who thinks kindness is optional. But somewhere along the way, she learned to value hardness, practicality, appearances. And me? I became embarrassing, too honest, too emotional, too inconvenient. I sat down on the couch, my knees cracking like they were trying to join the conversation. I closed my eyes and breathed. That dinner scene replayed again. Thomas's smirk, Caroline's silence, the laughter bouncing off the room like cheap echoes. And I realized something powerful. It wasn't the insult that changed everything. It was their comfort with it. That told me everything I needed to know. I got up and walked toward the bookshelf Richard built. He was always making something with his hands. "Keeps a man honest," he'd say. My fingers drifted over the spines of the books until they landed on the bottom drawer, the drawer I barely touched. Inside were the documents I'd been collecting for months. Bank statements, property deeds, trust drafts, all neatly stacked in folders. I didn't pull them out. Just opening the drawer felt like opening a secret I'd been keeping from myself. I didn't start gathering those papers out of anger, not then. I did it because a woman living alone has to think ahead. People love saying family is everything until it's time to actually show up for their elders. Then suddenly the elders become confusing, needy, too emotional, too sensitive. The words change, but the meaning stays the same. They don't want to deal with you unless you're easy to control. I closed the drawer gently and walked back to the dining table. My eyes landed on the framed photograph of Richard and me on our 45th anniversary. He was leaning slightly toward me, wearing that tiny smile he saved only for me, like he was listening to a secret only I could tell. I traced the edge of the frame with my finger. "You'd probably say I waited too long," I whispered. But he wouldn't have said it harshly. He would have said it with gentle humor, nudging me like he used to when I missed something obvious. I leaned back in the chair, letting the cushion swallow me for a moment. The silence was comforting, not lonely. People get that wrong all the time. Loneliness isn't being alone. Loneliness is being surrounded by people who dismiss you, people who roll their eyes when you speak, who mock your memory, who treat your existence like a favor they're doing you. Being alone in a quiet home? That's not loneliness. That's peace. I looked around the room, noticing all the little bits of my life. The quilt my mother made before arthritis stole her hands. The old lamp that flickers sometimes, but I can't throw away. The sofa Richard and I bought secondhand when money was tight. These things held stories. My stories. Not the stories my family assumed I lived, but the ones I actually lived. I let out a slow breath, long and steady. For the first time in years, I felt awake, like reality had snapped into focus, and not in a sad way, in a liberating way. Thomas's insult didn't break me. It revealed me. It peeled off the layers of excuses I had wrapped around my family, excuses that covered their dismissiveness, their entitlement, their neglect. The kettle whistled faintly from the kitchen, but I didn't move. I just listened. Let it whistle. Let the tea go cold. Tonight wasn't about tea. Tonight was about clarity. I didn't need to yell at them. I didn't need to confront them. Those days were done. I didn't owe them explanations or money or emotional labor. What I owed myself, finally, was peace. And I promised myself something right then and there in that silent house with the ticking clock. I would never again let anyone, family or not, decide my worth for me. Whatever came next, I was ready.
The next morning rolled in slow, like it knew I wasn't in any kind of rush to meet it. Sunlight leaked through my curtains in those thin, dusty stripes that make a room look older than it is. I pushed myself out of bed, my joints complaining like they were filing an official grievance. Yeah, I muttered. I hear y'all. Getting old is noisy, but at least the noises are honest. I shoveled into the kitchen, made some coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and sat at the table, staring at the steam dancing up like it was trying to tell me something. Maybe it was. Because that morning, more than any morning before it, I felt a strange mix of calm and fire. Like someone lit a candle inside me, but instead of flickering weak, it burned low and steady. No rush, no panic, just ready. Truth is, I'd already been preparing for months, long before Thomas opened his big mouth. Not because I expected a family betrayal, but because a woman living alone learns to move smart. You don't wait for trouble to knock. You reinforce the lock. I carried my coffee into the small office room Richard once used. It smelled faintly like old paper and lemon polish, which honestly